Hello everybody. The purpose of this video is to talk about my experience with the Commandos portion of the One-Run challenge. If you don't know what that is, I have two videos, the first covering the rules of the challenge and the second highlighting the completed Commando run. Now, you may be asking, if you've already made a video on Commando's run, why are you talking about it again? Well, because aside from the one run that I actually completed, there were almost 200 runs before that point. Getting the final run did take some amazing RNG being on my side, yes, but I also had to learn new things and improve my own playstyle to finally execute the run. This video will be a little bit different than usual. It'll just be my uninterrupted thoughts with some background footage for eye candy, so feel free to minimize the video and only listen to the audio. The first topic I want to touch on was also the most frequent question I got during the runs, which was, why are you picking up shield gens? Don't they ruin your one-shot protection? No, shield gens don't ruin your one-shot protection in the sense that they disable it or remove it entirely or something. It's simply that if you have shields equal to at least 10% of your total health pool, upon taking damage that completely removes the shields, so 10% of your health, you can no longer leech or regen your health back up to one-shot protection levels. Your only option is to wait for your shields to recharge, which the recharge begins after 7 seconds of not taking damage, and then takes about another 2 seconds to fully regenerate depending on the amount of shields you have. That entire process is what I'm referring to when I say shields ruin one-shot protection. Now, in a normal run, where you have most, if not all, of the items and equipment available to you, this is definitely something to consider. If you have a few leeching seeds, harvester sites, and especially a rejuve rack or two, there is little to no reason to use shields, as you will easily recover your HP after being hit with the plethora of healing mechanics you have. Waiting around for your shields to recharge is a pointless strategy when you can just heal back in the blink of an eye. Also, having a higher HP pool in such a situation is not only irrelevant, but downright inferior, because each of your heals are flat values and do not depend on your total HP pool. So the lower your total HP pool is, the faster you will be able to recover it. Not to mention, any item that has a proc coefficient of above 0 can heal you, meaning every single ukulele, ATG, Will of the Wisp, Ceremonial Dagger, Testicoil, etc., as well as your normal abilities, will be healing you so long as you're in combat. Now, the question then becomes, okay, but how often does an Omega healing situation occur? Am I going to be reaching those levels of healing in every single run? No, definitely not. Which brings me now to the one-run challenge. The reason I not only picked up but prioritized shield gens was because of the lack of healing available to me. If you don't have a lot of healing, then the next best option is to simply be able to soak up more damage before dying, right? Not having access to gnarled wood sprites, rejuve racks, but most importantly harvester sites, meant that my only reliable healing source was leeching seeds. 1 HP per hit doesn't really scale that well outside of getting tons and tons of stacks, so having a higher HP pool was absolutely superior, no questions asked, especially when adding in some topaz brooches on top. Also, the fact that I didn't have teddy bears or goat hooves meant that I was taking a lot more hits than in a normal run. You will seriously feel the impact of not having those two items on a survivor that can't sprint in combat, and all of this is even further supported with the high HP playstyle. Moving on now to time spent per stage. This is a big one. For the first 10 days or so of the challenge, I treated the runs as I would any other run, with the conscious effort of spending no more than 5 minutes per stage for the first loop and making the Prayon accumulator a top priority. Yeah, that was definitely not the right way to approach the runs, and sure enough, after I began taking my time and making sure to squeeze as much value out of each stage as possible early on, the runs became much more consistent. Now, the Prayon itself isn't a bad equipment, not at all, but not having access to a gesture and especially fuel cells meant that its scalability was much lower inside of the one-run challenge rule set. In normal runs, the Prayon's power comes from its ability to wipe the entire screen clear of enemies at a moment's notice. In the one-run challenge, this is not the case. 140 seconds is much too long of a cooldown when something like a Primordial Cube at 60 seconds accomplishes virtually the same thing as the Prayon once you get a single Will of the Wisp. Booking it through the first 2 stages in order to potentially get Rally Point Delta as stage 3 and then grab the Prayon before 10 minutes turned out to hinder my runs, so by day 10 I begun thinking of the Prayon as a nice bonus rather than a necessity, and again the runs became much more consistent as a result. And because I no longer had to stick to a stringent 5 minutes max per stage for the early game, I had much more freedom in my approach. Speaking of the early game, by far my best starts were when I got a few tri-tip daggers off of the first stage. My word, do these bad boys make the first 4 stages a complete joke. Now, do not take this to mean tri-tips are the best early game item to get, because remember, this is inside of the context of the one-run challenge, which is essentially an extremely unforgiving commando run. Emphasis on commando, a survivor whose kit almost exclusively revolves around his rate of attack. If you're playing someone like Loader or Artificer, tri-tips aren't going to be nearly as good on them compared to the big Mando. I've always stuck to the notion that damage is your best friend in Risk of Rain 2, because if you kill everything before they can even look at you, then you have nothing to worry about. This is exacerbated to the maximum in the early game because the enemies haven't scaled up yet and thus will die extremely fast, which gives you a massive window to just run around and look for that dank loot. Speaking of running around, yeah, the red whip is actually great for this challenge as well. Why? Because the only other source of mobility is from energy drinks. And again, if you have some nice damage, most of your time spent will be running around between the chests, multi-shops, and other interactables. Getting a red whip or two is also the best way to glitch through the desert door to get the double bands. Call it an exploit if you want, but being able to acquire an otherwise unobtainable set of double bands is a gargantuan help in overcoming the Commando's run. Seriously, I cannot overstate that. Finally, I want to talk about the big three. There were three legendary items that were the ultimate trifecta to get: Brilliant Behemoth, Shattering Justice, and Resonance Disc. Hold up, where are the ceremonial daggers? While daggers are great, they require quite a bit of setup to be super effective. If you don't have multiple stacks of wisps or ATGs, daggers do next to nothing past the second loop of a run because they'll just be slamming into enemies who have way higher HP than the daggers do damage. Their strength comes from their synergy with on-hit and on-kill effects, so if you're lacking on either, daggers do not perform that well. Resonance Disc, on the other hand, dang, this thing is nice. It's kind of like inverse daggers. Doesn't need a lot of setup to get going, but it also doesn't scale that well. Not that it doesn't scale at all, but rather it will be outpaced by the daggers in terms of the sheer screen clearing capability. But man, is the disc a blessing to receive in the early to mid game. Its numbers don't look too great on paper with a mere 300% damage while traveling and 1000% on hit, but the rapid pace that it will be flying out and targeting things makes it a very strong item for both AoE and single target damage alike. Behemoth and Justice are the two other reds whose main purpose are to bolster single target damage. Specifically with the Justice, the amount of extra damage it provides is unmatched for a single item. If I didn't have a Justice by the third loop, the run I was on would continue for maybe a couple more stages at best before grinding to a screeching halt from the lack of damage to elites and teleporter bosses. To summarize, when you don't have access to every great item in a given rarity, holy moly, do the already available ones feel so much better to get when they do finally pop up. And that does it regarding the one-run challenge and what I've learned thus far. Did you like this steady stream of consciousness style of video, or was it too much info without the relevant footage or images? Let me know with a like or dislike on the video and a comment below. And while the Commandos portion, and Huntress, of the challenge is done, the challenge as a whole still must be conquered. You can check out my continued progression over at twitch.tv/Woolie Gaming and consider joining our Discord server for notifications when I go live or upload a new video here. Thank you for watching.